Welcome back, and in this demo lesson you're going to get some experience interacting with CloudWatch. So you're going to create an EC2 instance, you're going to cause that instance to consume some CPU capacity, and then you're going to monitor exactly how that looks within CloudWatch. Now, to do this in your own environment, you'll just need to make sure that you're logged into the general AWS account as the IAM admin user, and as always, make sure that you have the Northern Virginia region selected, which is US-East-1. Once you've got those set correctly, then click in the search box at the top and type EC2, find the EC2 service, and then just go ahead and open that in a brand new tab. Now we're going to skip through the instance creation process because you've done that in a previous demo lesson. So just go ahead and click on Instances and then Launch Instance. Under Name, I just want you to put CloudWatch Test as the instance name. Then scroll down, and then under the Amazon machine image to use, we're going to use Amazon Linux. It's going to be Amazon Linux 2 HVM SSD volume type. It should be listed as free tier eligible. We'll leave the architecture set to 64-bit x86 and scroll down. It should already be set to an instance type which is free tier eligible, in my case T2.micro. We'll be connecting to this instance using EC2 Instance Connect, so we won't be using an SSH key pair. So in this drop down, just click and then say proceed without a key pair. We won't need one because we won't be connecting with a local SSH client. Scroll down further still, and under Network Settings, click on Edit and just make sure that the default VPC is selected. There should only be one in this list, but just make sure that it's set as default. Under Subnet, we can leave this as no preference because we don't need to set one. We will need to make sure that Auto Assign Public IP is set to Enable. And then under Create Security Group, for the name and for the description, just go ahead and type CloudWatch SG. So CloudWatch SG for both the security group name and the description. Now the default for security group rule should be fine because it allows SSH to connect from any source location, and that's what we want. Scroll down further still and we'll be leaving storage as default. Remember, this is set from the AMI that we pick, and it's currently set to 8 GB of GP2 storage, and that's what we want. Now, because this is a CloudWatch lesson, we're going to set something a little bit different. So expand Advanced Details and then scroll down and look for Detailed CloudWatch Monitoring. Now, this does come at an additional cost. So you've got a couple of options. You can just watch me do this, or you can do this demo without detailed monitoring enabled. And if you don't enable this, it will be entirely free, but you might need to wait a little bit longer for things to happen in the demo lesson, so keep that in mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enable detailed CloudWatch monitoring, and if we click on info here, we can see some details about exactly what that does, and we can also open this in a new tab and explore what additional charges apply if we want to enable it. Now in this case, I'm going to enable it. You don't have to. It's not a huge charge, but I think for me demoing this to you, it's good that I enable it. You don't have to. You might just have to wait a little bit longer for things to happen in the demo. Now once all of that's set, just scroll all the way down to the bottom and go ahead and click Launch Instance. Now this might take a few minutes to create. We're first waiting for this success dialog, and once that shows, we can go ahead and click on View All Instances. Go ahead and click Refresh until you see the instance. It will start off in a pending state with nothing listed under Status Check. After a few moments, this will change status. We'll see that it's in a running state, and then we need to wait for this to change to 2 of 2 status checks before we continue. So go ahead and pause the video, wait for your status check to update, and once it does, we're good to continue. Okay, so now this has changed to 2 out of 2 checks passed, and that's good, that's what we want. So it should display running under instance state, and then 2 out of 2 checks passed under status check. Once this is the case, go ahead and click in the search box at the top and just type CloudWatch, locate the CloudWatch service, and then open that in a brand new tab. This is the CloudWatch console, and it's here where we're going to create a CloudWatch alarm. Now, if you see anything about a new UI or new features, you can just go ahead and close down that dialog. Once we're here, go ahead and click on Alarms on the left and then click on All Alarms. This will show a list of all the alarms that you've configured within CloudWatch, and currently there aren't any. What we're going to do is to create an alarm. So click on Create Alarm and then click on Select Metric. Once we're on this screen, scroll down and we're going to be looking for an EC2 metric because we need to find the CPU utilization metric, which is inside the EC2 namespace. In other words, it comes from the EC2 service. So go ahead and click on EC2, and then we're looking for per instance metrics. So click on per instance metrics, and this will show all of the EC2 instance metrics that we currently have. Now if I scroll through this list, what you'll see is that I have 2 different instance IDs. Because I'm using this account to create all of these demo lessons, in my case I see previous instances. Now looking here, we can see that the one that ends 627 has no name specified. If I scroll all the way up to the top, I can see that 046 is my CloudWatch test instance. So this is the instance which I want to create the alarm on. I want to find out when this instance in particular goes over a certain CPU utilization. Now if you're doing this in your account, if you go back to the EC2 management console, you can see your instance ID here. In my case it ends 046, but you'll be looking for your specific instance ID. Now back at the CloudWatch console I can see all of the metrics for instance ID ending 046, and what I'm looking for is the one for CPU utilization. So that's this one. So 046 CPU utilization. So I'm going to check the box next to this metric. Now this is the metric that monitors, as the name suggests, CPU utilization on this specific instance ID, which is our CloudWatch test instance. If I scroll up, I'm able to see any data that's already been gathered for this specific instance, and as you can see, it's not a great deal at the moment because we've only just launched this instance. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Select Metric, and then because we're creating an alarm, it's going to ask us for what metric and conditions we want to evaluate. So I'm going to scroll down, and under Conditions, I'm going to pick Static because I want this alarm to go into an alarm state when something happens to the CPU utilization. So I'm going to ask CloudWatch that whenever the CPU utilization is greater or equal to a specific value, then to go into an alarmed state. So that value is going to be 15%. So whenever the CPU utilization on this EC2 instance is greater or equal to 15%, then this alarm will go into the alarm state. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. Now you can set this up so that if this alarm goes into an alarm state, it can notify you using SNS. Now that's useful if this is in production usage, but in this case we're not using it in production, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Remove. Scroll down to the bottom. There's also other things that you could pick, so you could do an auto-scaling action, an EC2 action, or a systems manager action, but we're going to be talking about these in much more detail as we move through the course. For now we're going to keep this simple. It's just going to be a basic alarm which goes into an alarm state or not. So click on Next, and then under alarm name I'm going to put CloudWatch Test and then High CPU, and you should do the same. So type that, click on Next, scroll down to the bottom and create that alarm. Now initially this alarm state will be insufficient data because CloudWatch hasn't yet gathered enough data on the CPU utilization to generate the state. That's fine because we've got another thing that we need to do first. So now move back to the EC2 console and we're going to connect into this instance using EC2 Instance Connect. Remember, that's the web-based way to get access to this instance. So over the top of the CloudWatch test instance, right-click and go to Connect. Make sure that EC2 Instance Connect is selected, so click that tab. You can leave everything as default and click on Connect, and that will connect you to this EC2 instance. Now there are 2 commands that we need to run in order to install a utility called Stress, and Stress is an application which will put artificial CPU load onto a system, and that's what we want to do in order to see how CloudWatch reacts. So the first command is this, so sudo space Amazon-Linux-extras space install space EPEL space -y. So go ahead and run that command. That will take a few moments and we need to wait for that to complete before running the next command. I'll clear the screen to make it easier to see, and this next command will use the yum package manager to install the stress utility. So go ahead and run this command and then clear the screen again. Now the stress command can be run by typing stress, and what we're going to do is do a double hyphen help just to get the help for this command. So what we're going to do is we're going to run stress and we're going to specify the number of CPUs to use, and we want that number to be the same number of virtual CPUs that this instance has. Now a T2.micro has one virtual CPU, and so the command that we need to run is stress space -c space 1 and then space, and then we're going to use -t, which is the timeout command, and this specifies how long we want to run this for. So we're going to specify 3600. So -t and then a space 3600, and this will run the stress for 3,600 seconds, and that's plenty for us to see how this affects the metrics which are being monitored by CloudWatch. Now what I want to do before we do that is go back to the CloudWatch console. You might need to refresh if you haven't seen the state update yet. In my case it's already showing as OK. So this means that it's now got access to some data. So click on this alarm and you'll be able to see that currently the CPU started off at very low levels and then it spiked up to 12. And potentially in my case that's because we've just installed some software. But note here this red line which indicates the alarm level for this alarm. So if the CPU utilization, which is in blue, exceeds this red line, then this alarm will move from OK to alarm. And that's what we want to simulate. So go back to the instance and press enter to run this stress command, and that's going to begin placing high levels of CPU load on this instance. And what we'll see over the next few minutes is CloudWatch will detect this additional CPU load and it will cause this alarm to go from OK into an alarm state. So move back to the CloudWatch console and just keep hitting refresh until you see a change in the alarm state. Again, this might take a few minutes. What I suggest you do is pause the video and wait for your alarm to change away from OK, and then you're good to continue. Now in my case this only took a few minutes, and as you can see the CPU load reported by this alarm in CloudWatch went from this value here, so 9.62%, and spiked all the way up to 35.76%, which is well above the 15% of this alarm value. So the alarm changed from OK to in alarm based on this excessive CPU. And if we keep monitoring this over time, you'll see that this trend continues because this CPU is under extremely high load because it's been artificially simulated using the stress utility. Now if we go back to this EC2 instance and press Ctrl and C at the same time, this will exit out of the stress utility. And at this point the artificial CPU load has been removed and the instance will gradually move back down to its normal levels, which is very close to 0. So again what you'll see is this may take a few minutes to be reflected inside CloudWatch. So keep refreshing this once you've cancelled the stress utility and wait for the reported CPU utilization to move back down below the alarm value. Again that might take a few minutes, so go ahead and pause the video and wait for this blue line to move back under the red line, and once it does you should see that the alarm state changes from in alarm to OK again. In my case it took a few minutes for the blue line to move below the alarm threshold and then a few more minutes afterwards for the alarm to change from in alarm to OK. But as you can see at this point that's exactly what's happened. Once the CPU usage goes below the configured threshold value, then the alarm changes back to an OK state. And at this point that's everything that I wanted to cover in this demo lesson on CloudWatch. CloudWatch is a topic that I'm going to be going into much more detail later on in the course. This has just been a really brief introduction to the product and how it interacts with EC2. Now at this point the only thing left is to clear up the account and put it back into the same state as it was at the start of this lesson. So to do that, go ahead and click on all alarms, Select the CloudWatch Test High CPU alarm that you created, click on the Actions drop-down, select Delete, and then confirm that deletion. Then go back to EC2, go to the Instances overview, right-click on the CloudWatch Test instance, making sure that it is the correct instance, so CloudWatch Test, and then select Terminate Instance and confirm that termination. Now that's going to move through a few states. It will start with shutting down, and you need to wait until that instance is in a terminated state. Go ahead and pause the video and wait for your instance to change into terminated. Okay, so once your instance has terminated, on the menu on the left, scroll down, go to Security Groups, select the CloudWatch SG security group, making sure that you do pick the correct one, so CloudWatch SG. Click on Actions, scroll down, delete security groups, and click on Delete. And at that point, the account is back in the same state as it was at the start of this demo lesson. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you gained some experience of the CloudWatch product, and again, we're going to be talking about it in much more detail later in the course. At this point though, go ahead and complete this video, and when you're ready, I'll look forward to you joining me in the next.